It's okay.
Guys.
It's running.
Guys, coming here.
Hi, okay, so welcome to the Game Master Seminar.
Yay!
Hopefully this will be the first of many events to come. And there will be 4 panels today. I'm running the first panel, and this is going to be an introduction to game mastery using specifically Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Alright, let me just put that up here.
Yeah, bring out the board.
Now we are going to record this and put it up on YouTube, so all the people who weren't able to make it can at least view the. Okay.
You just need to subscribe.
We're keeping this on record for posterity.
Yeah, we're doing this for we're keeping it for posterity. Okay, so this is my panel for today. So the way this will work is that anyone can stop me at any time to ask questions or share their experiences, because I know there are a lot of experienced DnD 5th edition GMs here. BJ is one of them. Yeah, and I think Gab, you're also a DM, right, for 5th edition? Ayun. So yeah. So if you have anything else to add to my points, feel free to just raise your hand and speak up. All right. And at the end, we'll just have like a question and answer portion after my presentation, where it's like a free-for-all, everyone can like talk and stuff and
Challenge people to duels.
Challenge people to duels.
I will try it infinity.
Okay. Wait, let me just kill the music here. Alright, so
I'm doing perception.
alright.
What's this?
So alright, so in 40 minutes time you should know which key rules parts of DnD 5 you need to know in order to be a DM. Okay, now this presentation is for people who are considering DMing but haven't really decided yet, or they don't know where to start. Alright, so if you're experienced, this might sound like, you know, really it might sound like old hat because you've done this already. And but you might want to. This is the second part. You might find interesting. How to get stuff. Basically, how to get stuff from real life stuff. How to get real life stuff from.
But when you're going through customs, it's like going for it.
Yeah, we will talk about that. We'll talk about that. Actually, that's probably where you'll get the value out of this particular panel. And some considerations that you have to have in mind when running the games. Hello! Alright, so I'll start off with the few assumptions. Okay, so you're somewhat familiar with DnD, because I will be going into the central core of the DnD mechanics. Second, yeah, you're willing to become a DM. Okay, now, the caveat is that, hello, come in. Justin! Alright, you can get your name tags over here. Now, the caveat is that there's no one true way. Okay, I have been gaming for over 20 years. I have some experience, but my experience might not be the most optimal way to do things, okay? So, my points might not be, you know, might not work for you. All right, because everyone is different. Everyone has their own way of handling things. But basically, these are what I think are my experiences from my observations in my years of gaming. All right. So with that, we'll start with the first one, which is rules competency. So I'll be talking in this section. I'll be talking about the core job of the DM in D&D 5th edition and how that relates to the entire system. So we'll be talking a bit about the system here in this particular part of the presentation. Alright, so at your core, what is the basic job of the DM? This is the basic job of the DM, illustrated by this comic. So, yeah. Yeah, so Goblin runs into the room, one was to the field, you miss, and then, actually the top three, this is like entertainment, the bottom is entertainment. The top three is actually, in a nutshell, the job of the DM. Okay, the DM tells the players what is happening in the world. The players react. And then the DM, based on the rules, will tell the players how their actions affect the world. In a nutshell, that is the job of the DM, or in any system. Okay. Basically, from this point on, I'm going all of what you're going to do is you're going from. So I'm going to show you how the core rules will enable this, right? So most of your job is this. Okay, you tell players what's going on, they tell you what you do in reaction, and then you show them the consequences of their actions, right? So all of the rules that I'm about that will be going over now will be going towards making you do that job. Alright. Yeah, that's the DRT quality there, right there. Alright, so basically the loop can be summarized that in this way. Everything that can act in DnD has 6 ability scores, right? So if it's players have this, monsters have this, everything that can do damage has this. Alright, so anything that can affect the characters have this. Except, yeah, generally most of the things have this. Alright, so the ability score represents an area of competency. Alright, so like for example, if you're trying to break down a door, that's strength. If a goblin is trying to break down the door, that's also strength of the goblin. That's basically the strength of the goblin. If you're trying to shoot an arrow at a target, that's dexterity. Or if you're trying to hide, that's also dexterity. Alright? So when monsters attack you, they'll either use strength or dexterity. So every action in the D&D world that could fail or succeed is based on one of the 6 ability scores. So obviously you know what the scores are, right? Strength, dexterity, constitution, charisma, intelligence, wisdom, right? So your first job as the DM, when you come to the situation that you're trying to resolve, you're trying to see if a player succeeds or fails at something, is to see which ability score is most appropriate for what the player is trying to do. So first of all, so the player will be reacting to you, right? Because you're describing the world. The player will now react to you. It's gonna say, like for example, you say, you're in a tavern. There are a bunch of rowdy dwarves in the corner, and your informants tell you that they know something about the location of a hidden mine. So then that's the GM, that's what you tell the players, and the player might say, okay, I want to gain the dwarves' respect by engaging them in a drinking contest. Okay, then you now think, okay, drinking contest means that most likely this would be a health thing, so that's constitution. So the attribute that I would pick for this contest is constitution. Alright, now if it were something else, like for example, you are trying to, you have a dead friend, you're trying to revive him, but the cleric is a cleric of, he's a cleric of the god of money. Okay, so he's charging you an insane amount of gold to have him resurrected. So now, of course, you want to haggle down. So haggling, as a player, you tell the GM, I want to haggle the price down. So sa GM, you think, okay, now this would definitely be a charisma roll because it would fall under charisma. Alright? So, any situation in the DnD world can be tied, the success or failure of any situation can be tied to any one of the 6 attributes. Okay? Okay. Oh, don't tire me now. Alright, so, after you know the attribute, now you go to the next step, which is to set a difficulty. Alright? So, this is taken from the player's handbook. So these are the typical difficulty classes. Now you look at this. Alright, so based on your reckoning as a DM, is this easy or is it hard? And how easy is it? Is it very easy, medium, hard? Then that would determine the difficulty rating that you would assign. So it is perfectly, this actually, if you're not familiar with the rules, you can actually just fall back on this technique. So you don't, let's say for example, I know in the DMG there is a system where you have to influence the NPCs. Like for example, in the case of you're haggling with the money grabbing cleric, there is a system by which you influence the cleric's position from hostile to friendly, ganon. But if you forget that, if you can't remember those rules, you can just fall back to, okay, in order for him to convince this cleric to lower his price, I think it's a hard charisma roll. So hard DC 20 charisma rolls. Yes, you roll 20 or higher is charisma. Okay? So yeah, use what you think is appropriate. That is basically so when if you don't know the rules, fall back on this. Alright? Obviously it's always good to learn the individual rules, no? Because it makes the game better. But I mean, if you can't remember any of the rules, remember this one. Alright? This is the basic core rule for D&D.
Sorry, just
Yeah.
like to add that when we're talking about setting difficulties, the difficulty here assumes an average person. It's not difficulty relative to the character. So if a guy is already horrendously strong, you don't just drop everything very easy because he's horrendously strong. The DCs always assume an average Joe performing it. So we use whatever DC is appropriate for an average Joe because the player character should have the stats to compensate for that difficulty.
Alright, so yeah, like what Jay said, thank you very much for that. The baseline here is average person. Right? So when you're setting the difficulties, just remember that.
Yeah,
Right?
an inspiration, Jay.
Yeah. So, all right. Now the third thing you have to also think about. Actually, this is also very important, and this is also actually one of the key features of D&D 5th edition that I find actually very, very good. Is advantage and disadvantage. So look at the situation around the action. What are the circumstances affecting it? If the circumstances are favorable to the action, then it will grant advantage. If it's not, disadvantage. What is it? Okay, briefly, for those who are not familiar with D&D 5th edition, advantage is when you is a mechanic in D&D where you roll 2 d20s and you pick the highest number. Disadvantage is the opposite. You roll 2 d20s and pick the lowest. Alright? So, if a situation would give a benefit to the player, then advantage. Otherwise, disadvantage. Now, how would that work? For example, in our negotiating with the cleric, for example, you know that this cleric likes to drink a certain type of wine. You might want to offer the cleric the wine as partial payment. Now, because of that, the DM might say, okay, this would definitely give them an advantage in the negotiation, so therefore, you have advantage. Alright? Disadvantage would work like this. Let's say you're trying to, let's say in the dwarven, let's say you're carousing with dwarves, right? You're trying to gain their trust. You're carousing with the dwarves in the tavern. If you are trying to do this right after doing a fast march on open terrain, you're tired, and you're trying to do this, then, hello, Yeah. Your name tag's over there somewhere. Just find it.
I almost went home. Kala ko sarado yung ano.
Yeah. So, okay. So,
right next to Jurassic Park.
yeah. So, yeah, disadvantage. You're tired. You barely got enough sleep. Then you have to carouse with the dwarves. That's a disadvantage on your roll. Right? So again, you have to consider what attribute will be appropriate for the player. Second, what difficulty level will you set? Third, look at the situation around what the player is doing. If it's favorable to him, grant advantage. If it's not favorable, grant disadvantage. But if it's neither, then you don't grant either. Yes.
Question.
Yeah.
Okay, so if can a player call advantage? For example, a player is using a longsword. Tapos, he's fighting against a foe using a dagger.
Yeah.
Can the player say, I should have advantage because I have a longsword? Can a player call an advantage?
So fake.
Okay. In the rules as written for D&D 5th edition, no. Alright, but let's say you forgot that. Go ahead. You forgot. Alright? Thing is, yeah.
I think the thing to remember there is that a player can ask for it, but ultimately, as the GMs, it's up to you if you're going to give it.
Yeah, okay, that's better. That's a lot better. That's a lot better way to resolve it. There you go. Yeah.
So I just want to add, well, yung sinabi ni Kuya, ni Pare is tama yun. So it's always based on the GM. But I just want to add, based on my experience on that rule, both the advantage and disadvantage can cancel each other. But what happens if, for example, you have 5 advantages versus 1 disadvantage?
Oh, actually,
Yun, what happened is, you
Yeah,
know,
go ahead,
I'm sure you're, I see. So, everything is cancelled.
yeah.
So,
It's basically multiple advantages.
Yeah, multiple
is still one
advantages.
advantage.
unfortunately, medyo...
So a single, if you have 5 advantages but a single disadvantage comes in, all is wasted.
But what if the player like makes a good point and grant?
Well, it's GM call.
That's your call as a GM. Okay, ultimately, unless you're playing in an Adventurers League game for D&D, it's your table, you can do whatever you want. Alright? Your job as a GM is to make the game fun for everyone. The core mechanic is, you see everything in D&D, every actor in D&D can be, every action in D&D can be boiled down to the basic ability scores. So like if you're going to throw a dagger, that's dexterity. If you're breaking down a door, that's strength. If you're trying to look for traps, that's a wisdom roll. Alright? So when the DM, when your player, as a DM, when the player asks you, I'm going to do this, you immediately try to think of what attribute should I assign to the action that they're doing. Alright? So the second is, after you know what attribute, you set a difficulty. So these are basically based on real world difficulty level, as in ordinary people. So remember that adventurers are competent, so they will have an easier time hitting the higher DC numbers. All right. So if you want to set it for the players, that you have to actually set it a bit higher.
Is that
Yeah.
based on a 20-sided die?
Yes.
5 to 30.
Yes.
So you need modifiers para makuha yung nearly impossible.
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
All right.
Or you roll an natural. Nearly impossible
Yeah.
is ano naman eh. Hitting the moon.
It's not about the natural threat. Well, applicable na rin.
This is for a normal everyday person of the world that you inhabit.
Dito and east.
Yeah. So
You become
and
Superman for 1 second.
finally, look at the situation around what the player is asking you to adjudicate. If there are factors that put an advantage for the player, grant advantage. If there is a factor that draws counter it, grant disadvantage. All right. So let's look at several of the core several of the rules in D&D 5th edition, and just to see that this basic mechanic is actually in all of them. Okay. So what about proficiency? All right. Proficiency basically the proficiency bonus on your character sheet basically says it's a bonus that you get if you are skilled at something. Obviously, if you are a fighter, you are skilled in martial weapons. So you get the proficiency bonus when you make your attack rolls. Alright? That's actually what the attack roll is all about. So the rule still applies. It's still there. Alright? In contests, whoever rolls highest wins. Instead of, in this case, the difficulty is not set by what you think is, what you judge is going to be the difficulty number, but the difficulty of the opposing player. You'll see this in the shove maneuver. Is it called shove? Charge? Yeah, shove, and grapple. You see this in shove and grapple, where you have to roll against the other person's attributes and the other person's roll in order to win. All right. So an interesting permutation is the passive check. All right. So in DnD 5th edition, when you roll a die, it is assumed that you're doing something active. All right. If you're not doing something active, then you don't roll. So what happens when you have to like invoke a passive roll? Like for example, when you're walking down the dungeon corridor, you spot the trap. You're not actively looking for a trap because maybe you're like you're having an argument with your partner over loot. So would you see the trap? So yeah. So you would need a passive check for that. You don't actually roll it if you find the loot. You would have, the DM would just look at your, okay, a passive check is always a static number. So, for example, in this case, it would be your passive perception, which is 10 plus wisdom.
10 plus all mods to perception.
Yeah, and if you're proficient in wisdom, then you get proficiency bonus. So there. However, you could apply this passive check to other things. Like for example, let's say the merchant. Let's say you are you're negotiating with an innkeeper, but the innkeeper really is working for your enemies. So while you're negotiating with the innkeeper to stay for the night. Would you notice the fact that he's trying to put you into a room that is trapped, or there would be something suspicious about this room? So you would roll again your passive, but that really it's more of a passive insight thing, right? Usually wisdom is what dominates most passive perception rolls, but it's also possible for others. Like for example, actually, things like disease, or poison, you could theoretically use Constitution for passive checks. And there are other ways you could do it. Like, if for example you are walking on a tightrope, that's passive dexterity. Alright? So, you only roll, so the thing is, the takeaway from this is in D&D 5th edition, you only roll if you have an action to do. Alright? Why is it that way? So that you minimize the dice rolling. Because the dice rolling does take time, so just so that you don't take as much time, you can just do that, right? So
question.
Yeah.
If I understand correctly, what you're telling us, we just look at the number. You
Number.
don't have to roll.
Yeah.
Okay.
If
So
it's
it's assumed that it serves essentially as a static value for all checks. So
Yes.
Technically, it's your average roll.
you
essentially,
only roll if you're going to act.
And also it adds secrecy. So hindi mo na kailangan mag-dice ka. So,
Okay.
and also, para sa akin, for hindi siya pababa, yun ang dahilan kaya kami laging mamatay sa dungeon. Yung mga traps na hindi na sumasabog,
Yeah.
yung mga biglang lumalabas na monster. So, kaya at least may passive. Hindi na lagi kailangan.
You have to actually open front everything.
Okay.
a bag of chickens
Yes.
on the holiday.
Alright, so
I checked the chickens for traps.
The chickens check my traps.
Another question.
yeah.
Another question. Is passive check only for perception or things like that?
No,
Definitely.
anything that doesn't involve an active roll you can use the passive number for.
So, for example, bigla akong malalaglagan ng something heavy but I can carry.
Percept, that would be a dexterity passive, a passive dexterity roll because you're not
Catching it.
you're trying to catch it. Yeah, that would be passive dexterity.
Exactly. So what is
Because it's not an active. It's not an active.
Would it be like 2 checks? Like if you see it coming, then
So you see it coming, that's your passive perception. You need to try to catch it without thinking about it. And that's
Well,
It's
when
passive
catching it
dexterity.
involve your dexterity and then managing to actually carry it afterwards.
yeah, I guess you could do it that way. But when you're already carrying it, then it's already active at that point.
Of course.
So you're already like putting effort into it. So that you need a strength roll already. Right. So if just remember if you're not thinking about it, passive. Use static numbers. If it's an active roll, you're putting effort or force or will into it. You have to roll.
Here, I think just to pull from a different rule set, there was in Fantasy Craft they had 2 skills called Spot and Search. So in terms of passive, we're looking at Spot. So you walk down a crowd, you spot anything, because you're not actively doing so, then that's what we call a passive check. Search on the other hand is actively doing the most CSI thing in the room. That's an active check. So in this case, that's the same. It's essentially the same thing, except they cut the number of skills, and you have static value for it.
Yeah.
Last one.
DJ.
For me, sa character sheet there are 2 passive scores that you read in perception and insight. This is not an actual rule, but what I do personally is I disregard the passive scores kasi especially when you want to do it for other things like what's your passive athletics. Para pag-iisip ng tao, 10 plus proficient ako plus ganyan. Medyo matagal na, you might as well just have roll. So, an alternative that I want to propose that you might consider is instead of asking for passive, just ask for the ability score of the character. What's your strength score? My strength's 15. Good. You can lift that, no problem. You don't need to roll. Tapos siguro kung proficiency sa athletics, that's another consideration.
you automatically add +10 for passives.
Not plus 10. Your score is 10.
Base 10.
Base 10.
Base
If you roll
plus any mods
Yeah,
that are
you
in the
roll.
check. But it's just a thing that I would recommend if your players don't like addition. There are players who don't like addition.
Yeah. So okay, go ahead.
And there are players that really love addition, in which case, go for passive. So, but basically what I'm saying is gauge your players.
Yeah, another thing that I also do, it's something like his, but what I also do is I just say, are you proficient at scale X? Like, are you proficient in religion? Are you proficient if you are, then I'll give the additional information. No need to roll. Because the proficiency basically means that you've actually studied it. So it would be likely that you're competent in it. So you would know these things. You'd actually see these things. So that's another way of dealing with that. All right. So closing out this part, remember if you forget something, just make it up. All right. Seriously, do not get, as a DM, do not get bogged down by the rules. Just remember that basic paradigm. I mean, some of the stuff I said probably is not legal. Like, for example, if you apply it in combat, because in combat there are specific rules for specific situations. But if you don't remember, just fall back on that, and it'll work. It'll work. Okay, that's the good thing about DnD. Just that core mechanic can adjudicate everything. Yeah. Alright, so next I'll be talking about materials.
Who are the other speakers here? I'm just curious now. Who are the other speakers?
Justin is another speaker.
He's
and
the second
Jay's, he's the second one, and then Jay's speaker. He's the last. We're waiting for Toby. He will be here. He's on his way. He lives in Quezon City, so it's a bit far.
Magical land of Quezon City.
Eventually.
I used to live in the magical land.
Alright, materials. Okay, this might interest the veteran.
Drafting?
No. No, this is. I'm going to talk about suggested participation levels. What I mean by participation levels is, assuming that you don't have any DnD stuff. How could you get into DnD with and how much money would you spend? All right.
I
So
think this shouldn't be on YouTube.
really? Well, I don't know. It's like for local. I mean, even people from the
Just don't
provinces.
drop branches or stores.
Talaga?
Or websites.
Yeah.
Pwede naman. Pero at social cost.
Yes.
Social cost.
Well, ano naman, because this is a based on my experience.
Okay.
Alright? So, I'll be discreet. Well, just let me know if I overstep it. We can edit this later, di ba? Edit na lang natin if ever,
No, you just take out like how to skip taxes and also.
I won't.
Pay your taxes, guys.
Everything is above board here. Everything is above board. Everything is legal. I will not discuss piracy. I will not discuss.
Yeah, don't download PDFs on my.
Sucks.
Download PDFs legally, buy them from drive-thrurpg.com.
Alright, so we have 3 participation levels. Alright? So, the first is Kuripot. Siyempre, Dr. Alright? And then the second is Dabbler. And, okay, Dabbler meaning that you want to put a little bit, but you don't want to put a lot of money into it. And then there's the supporter, which is you're actually entering the hobby now. Alright? So, for Kuripot, okay, how much money can you spend for it? Potentially 0. It could be free. This is how to get DnD for free. So you download the rules from here and print them out. Okay? There are 2 PDFs at this website for players and for DMs. So all you need to do is go to that site and download it. All right. So all you need as far as for accessories, all you need is paper and pens. Okay. Because your maps will look like this. Your maps will look like that. These are yeah. That's it. That's it. You can validly play DnD just like this.
That looks familiar.
Why?
I think I was part of this table.
This is the first encounter from Lost Mines of Fandelver.
Yeah.
Alright?
I think I've been through there.
Yeah, the dead horse, the goblins. Alright, so because all you really need to play at this level is you need to know where everybody is in relation to the other players. Right? So this is a perfectly valid way to play D&D 5th edition. So potentially, you don't have to pay anything. Alright, however, you're only limited to the 4 basic classes. But the thing is, the 4 basic classes are still rather diverse. For example, fighters, you can be a bow fighter or a sword fighter.
Sword and board.
Yeah, sword and board. So, and if your group really isn't, you just want to play, you don't really want to customize your characters, this is perfectly fine. All right.
And they have keycaps.
Right. But however, you need to write your own adventures because all you get from this page are rules. All right. So there's lots of support on the various. There's lots of support to help you do that. In fact, these seminars are also supposed to be a venue for that as well. How to write adventures and sort of thing. Also, if you don't want to write your adventures, you could join the Adventurers League. Because the Adventurers League is basically, that's where a game store will have adventures that you can run with your friends. So they'll have events, you can come to the store, they'll have an adventure for you, you can run it with your friends. So this is basically how to play D&D for absolutely no money. Alright? So, that's the one yeah.
Actually, I'm new on the community thing. So, how do I know if the shop is an Adventurers League patron or something?
Okay, an Adventurers League shop, the shop has to be at least, it has to be part of the Wizards Play Network. And second, they have to be of threshold. I think it's parang level 1 ng Wizards Play Network. They have to be level 1. So I'm not sure if GL is that yet. So we have to set that up for But that's the minimum for organized play.
Question. So is there a website where I can look at all the shops or normally?
Okay. For the Philippines,
It's hard.
ang alam ko,
At least.
yeah. Ang alam ko, for the Philippines, it's only I mean, Comic Quest did hold an Adventurers League session. I heard reports that they did. DnD did also last 29, December 29. But we need to, in order to get the modules from Wizards of the Coast, we have to register. So I will talk about that with Jose later. I'll help him get BNB registered so we can get these modules. But that's definitely in the works. We can try to get these modules in so we can support people who want to DM. Alright? So that's it for report. Any
And 2-hit armor class 0.
Flaco, yeah. Yeah, you could opt to play other games. That's another option. There are lots of free games out there. So that's the table. Alright, so the second is the Dabbler. Alright, so for Dabbler, you're probably going to spend that's like mga 2,000 siguro at most. Alright, what are you getting? The starter set. Starter set is about, well, depending on where you buy it, Amazon is actually selling it for $12 now. Yeah, so it's that cheap. Yeah, starter set looks like that.
No dice though.
I've seen it set up around 1,000.
So 1,000 siya.
All the DnD
Yeah.
models.
So mga $1,000 siya. 1,000 pesos. Okay. And for your print, and then for your accessories, if you don't like the paper, the paper figs, you could download print and play PDFs from Drive-Thru RPG. These ones are basically illustrations, and they are bound to. You print them out on sticker paper, stick the sticker paper onto Bristol board, and you can also print out maps, and you get something like this. You get something like that. Okay, so you have, this is the same encounter from earlier. There's the dead horse, there's the zombies. Alright?
We're gonna beat that dead horse with a stick.
Yeah. So,
It might be a trap.
Bristol board. So you can buy these PDFs from Drive-Thru RPG. They're very cheap. Some of them are like $5, $6. You can buy. I know there's a $10 pack which has like all the monsters from Lost Mines of Fandelver. Or I think it's $5 only. But basically, you're just paying the artist because all of them have art. So you just print it out on sticker paper, stick it on Bristol board, and you just cut it out with a cutter, and then you have that. Alright? For the maps, there are maps that are available. You can download those too. There are some maps that are even available for free on Wizards site. You can just print those out to colored printer. There you go. So not very expensive. 2,000 pesos at most, including your printing costs, assuming you have the equipment to print it out. Alright? So the third is the supporter level, which is, this is the most expensive level because you're looking at least 5,000
Is it dollars?
pesos.
Okay.
There's no USD, so that's pesos.
There's no HP, we don't know.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Our unit.
Alright, you have to get the core rule book
It's not
PLG.
even in pizzas.
In pizzas, that's about 12 pizzas?
No. Depends if it's yellow card.
8 to 10 pizzas. 8 to 10 pizzas to get this. Alright.
Actually, a very good list of
So you have what you need to get the core rule books. So that's the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Master Manual, and the accessories. Alright. The thing is, with this, you are able to make your own adventures with official support. Because the DMG has all the rules you need to make your own adventures, and they even suggest stuff. There's even a random dungeon generator in the DMG. Right? Yes, and the optional rules, which are pretty cool. The monster manual, it's all the monsters that you'll ever need. So everything that you need to make your own adventure, it's there. You just have to pay like 5,000 to 6,000 pesos for it. This includes shipping. It could be more, could be less. We will discuss that later. Right? table might look like that with minis and a battle mat. And there's the dead horse
There's
again.
still a dead horse.
It's still the same encounter.
Just so you know, it's the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alright, so...
Multiple versions of the dead horse.
Yep. Alright, so now we're gonna talk about... Yes.
I just want to add that you can mix and match the three levels of
Yes,
support.
yes.
For example, you could just go for the basic rules and then buy Horde of the Dragon King. That'll cost you about 2,000 pesos, I think. I'm not sure how much.
Yeah.
But that could be just your cost right there. You don't need to prepare your own adventure. You pay for the adventure, but you could play with the 4 basic classes, and then you could go on with that. Or you could go full supporter, but choose to not use minis. I see people who are full supporters who still use the graphing paper. Good old graphing paper and pencil and lumipat ka o ikaw yung A ha.
I actually use counters myself because I don't have all the minis. I did when I went crazy and bought a lot of 4th edition minis. I bought some, but it's not complete. So my fault.
4th edition did that.
Yeah. 20,000 pesos on 4th edition stuff.
4th edition has only
You're a
less than
supporter.
5 years.
I know.
It's a book. That's
Alright, so
George Orwell.
now we're gonna talk about how to get the stuff. Alright? So there are 3 ways to get the stuff. Because in the Philippines, it's really hard to get this stuff.
Yeah.
Alright, so the first way is Amazon. Well, no, actually this is not just... This is,
We're gonna get it.
Walang taxes yun, di ba?
Pwede na pa-deliver sa
Anyway.
Amazon?
It goes on and off. Sometimes it's not available, sometimes it is. Currently it is.
alright. So Amazon is... I mentioned Amazon because they do ship to the Philippines. A lot of the major... Well, there are also a lot of major retailers in the US who do ship to the Philippines. I know Troll and Toad does. But there are a lot who don't. But Amazon does. And they usually have the cheapest prices. That's why I mentioned Amazon here. But if you take that path, as in you have them ship it to you, there are your taxes. Alright? Okay, now you might or might not be taxed. I have gotten, in my experience, because I basically shipped like 80% of the Exalted 2nd edition line to the Philippines. Yeah, I went crazy with that line too. 3/4 of my books were not taxed. But 1/4 of my books were. Alright, so it's really, okay. Yeah.
Charles had a
Charles Stan.
system for it. Charles Stan.
Yeah.
Diba he said, because of the way how convoluted it is, you have to bring the law itself, print it out, then you show it to
Oh,
them.
there. That's a good
The
idea.
burden of law is on the person, not
Is this a loophole?
No, it's
No,
legal.
Actually legal.
Books
It's
are
legal.
supposed to be exempt from a certain tariff.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which
Actually,
one.
Almost all of
Should
them.
be this one. It should be this. You should only be paying this. You should only be paying this for books. Dapat yung tariff mo 0.
Supposedly.
Oo.
But thing is, not all of them know that. So
they
you
will
have
be
to bring the law.
And they work there.
Yes, and they were there.
No,
They don't know it for books
So
because
Pero it's...
importing books is not exactly a widespread thing. So you have to make sure that you know what that they know that you know what you're doing.
Right.
Either that or if you're comfortable with paying the extra cost, I mean, para lang hindi ka na mabad trip.
Alright.
I'll make this quick. I guess we're in a short timeline. So who determines the taxation? The customs taxation?
The guy there will write it up.
So when you claim it sa post office, nakapakita yung tax. So pag pinakita mo yung law, too late na.
No.
You can use it to contest.
You can contest it.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
Can that person, post office
Ay, yun
employee,
lang.
make the
Depende
decision
how
of
Yes.
gano'n
Yes.
kalaki yung
Yes.
packet.
That's the funniest thing that Charles discovered that he brings it.
Because there was this whole thing about it back in 2009 about tax.
Oh, kasi bago lang yun.
It was called the book blockade because
Yeah,
they
book blockade.
wanted to put taxes on books, pero we're a signatory to something called the Berne Convention, I think, which says na hindi dapat tayo magbabayad ng tariff for books because it's counter to the idea that books are educational.
But just but they might not tax you at all. In my experience, I noticed if I kept my orders below $50, they don't tax me. But if I go above that, then they do.
This is the Makati post office.
Makati, Mandaluyong, and Quezon City.
Yeah, we're pointing
Right?
at you guys.
So, but the legal minimum is this:
We'll post it into
515 pesos for each shipment, plus that's your import processing fee, plus the document stamp tax, plus 12% VAT of the entire shipment cost. That's what a lot of people get shocked at because customs doesn't look at the price of the item, they also look at the shipping cost and the item together. That's what the law says.
Okay.
So don't be surprised why it's so big. It's like, because if your shipping cost is bigger than the cost of your item, expect that because you're gonna take it together, expect that your tariff rate will be also bigger than the cost of the item together. Alright, so now if
You gotta know laws.
yeah, so that's one way. Second way is freight forwarders.
Yeah.
Alright, which is turning out to be pretty good. Well, I've used them. So there's two that I know of.
I can
Yeah.
add to that, that will help you. It's called Trident Shipping. 650 pesos per kilo ship.
Okay, there.
Tax and VAT included.
Oh, there you go. That's actually the biggest thing about freight forwarders. They handle the tax for you.
Where are their offices?
You have to address it to LA. If you research Trident Shipping or Trident Logistics, it's like Johnny Air.
Yeah.
You have to send it to New Jersey, New York, di ba?
Yeah.
Sila po.
Ito, you have to send it to their office in LA, and they send it to, just like Johnny Air.
Yeah. Yes, that's actually how the freight forwarders work. Send it to them,
Cool.
and then they ship it to you.
Shipping.
For Johnny Air, you pick it up at one of their branches. They have a branch in Makati and they have a branch in Mega Mall. I think they also have a branch in Fairview. Alright? And they have, for our provincial viewers, Johnny Air also has branches in the provinces.
Once you get here, you just have to pay them.
But Johnny Air is a bit pricey. But they get here in 2 weeks.
And it can
Since
be
we're talking
almost
about-
percentage.
It's fast, but it's pricey.
It's fast but it's pricey. But it'll get here in 2 weeks and you'll have less hassle. Po box is balikbayan box. So it gets here in about 2 months
By sea.
by sea.
But it's cheap.
Yeah, it is definitely cheaper than Johnny Air. So if you're willing to wait, you can order it in the US and have them ship it to Po box or Trident Shipping, like what Justin said, and they'll send it to here. All right, so
And they're not the only options. There are other options, but I won't mention them because I don't work for them. But there are other options besides the ones that we mentioned.
I've actually used Johnny Air. I've actually ordered. I actually used them to get my Kickstarter rewards for the Fate Core Kickstarter. So I had like 5 books shipped to me. Cost me about 1/8. But I got him. Okay, and of course, if you can buy locally, please do. We need the support. We need to support our retailers. So 2 retailers are, but of course, Gaming Library.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Gaming Library will stock more RPG materials so that we can get them. And then
We got Numenera.
yeah, Numenera is available here. And Fortress Games, that's another retailer. They also have RPG materials, but
Good terms with them.
yeah, they don't stock them all the time, and they're usually gone. So, if you can, try to get. Well, personally, I would just appeal to try to get your game materials locally, so that you can support our hobby. Because if the retailers see that we are buying from them, they will be more inclined to support us, and that will mean more support for seminars like this, and for even store events like RPG tournaments will be possible if we have retailer support, stuff like that. So if you can, please buy local, right, and support our businesses. Yes.
Si Michael ang yung contact person ko sa Fortress.
Yes. Yeah.
Si Edsel board siya.
Cards.
All right. So my last point, which I'm actually over time already, so I'll just make this quick. All right, this is basically logistical considerations. This is for people. This is for if you're planning a game, things you need to remember about D&D 4th edition. All right, the minimum number of players you need to play D&D is 3. So that's written in the rules. You can play with 3 players, but the recommended is 4. All of the encounters in the published adventures are balanced for a party of 4. So if more than 4, like my table is 6. I have a table of 6. So I actually have to add more monsters to balance it. Alright? So, but if you have more players, you will need to have your session will be longer because each additional player needs time at the table, and you also have to put screen time on that player so they can role play. So, if you have more players, make sure that you budget more time. Usually, it takes about 4 hours to play a game, minimum, and max is 12. So you just have to get a feel for your group. Okay. So, where can you play? Residences. All right. Of course, at somebody's house, but of course, syempre, you have to be a gracious host, don't be messy and all of that. I actually got into trouble with my parents once because my gaming group left a mess that I couldn't clean up in time. Alright, so if you're playing at someone's house, just be, courteous. You can also play in game shops, but each game shop has a different policy with regards to play. Why? Because when you sit at the table, you occupy that space for 4 hours to 12 hours. And that space might be, especially if the place is selling food, that's space that won't be going to a paying customer. So they have different policies. Like, for example, here in B&B, if you come in on a weekday, you have to pay the entrance fee of 80 pesos, but you stay there for the whole day. Yeah. But if you go to Gaming Library's newest tie-up, which is in Capitolio, I think you have to buy a minimum amount of food, which is like I think 200 or more, I'm not sure. And then you have to, but that one will let you stay the whole day. But you have to have a minimum food purchase. So if you play every day, it will rack up. So you have to bear that in mind for that. Restaurants are possible, but not recommended because I remember the old ages days. We camped out in front of Starbucks, and the Starbucks manager got annoyed at us because there were like 20, 30 people in Starbucks not buying any coffee. And we were there for hours. So they got annoyed at us. Remember that? That's why it's not recommended for restaurants.
I actually would want to add there was a time back in D&D 3.5 when we played consistently at Bo's Coffee in Livogan.
Yeah.
But before we did that, we actually talked to the management beforehand. We planned to, and I told them that I want to run this game here. We're going to be here for about 4 to 6 hours. But in recompense, I will pledge that my group will buy at least 1 drink every hour, and that's at least. So
so everything is available.
How much is it to rent karaoke rooms here in the Philippines?
It's more expensive.
If you go the off time, like for example, from lunch to like 6 o'clock, it's cheap.
Saan naman yung karaoke sa Rojas?
Or yung karaoke room sa Tom's World.
Masikip dun.
Actually, there's a funny story I remember that there was a Japanese group that does start. So they rented a karaoke. They rented a karaoke room, a large karaoke room. So they was doing their LARP, and then one of them ordered drinks, and they forgot they were ordering drinks. So when the server came in, all of them were in costume, and they were like performing this Cthulhu ceremony. So
Does the Victoria Port have those like special rooms?
Yeah.
yeah,
It'll be cheaper.
Yeah, it's cheaper, and you can have sex.
And you'll get bad stares at you.
So anyway,
Bunch of guys walking into a motel room.
You just do different kinds of role playing.
My last point is
It's a skip rolling, guys.
just remember that modules usually take about 4 to 8 sessions to play. Lost Mines of Andelver is built for 8 sessions. So that would mean you'll have, if you play every week, you'll finish it in 2 months. So that's the sort of time commitment you're going to need if you get into the role-playing game.
So good.
Alright?
So, I'm sorry, you said karaoke from lunchtime to what time? Sorry?
6,
That's
about
an hour.
lunchtime to 6. 6 p.m.
How much is the hour?
Depends kasi on where you
3 hours.
where you rent. If you go in Makati, it's obviously going to be pricey. But if you go to like the ones in the other mga tabi-tabi, then they get cheaper. So yun. Alright. So anyone? Questions? Yes.
Kanina kasi I saw you wet erase board dun sa tools, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I completely forgot this. You can buy this for 300 pesos at National Bookstore. If you don't have a battle mat, you could use this. Just use whiteboard markers and then erase.
Okay.
And if I were you, I would actually make a grid on this.
Actually put minis on.
With actual permanent marker,
Okay.
so that you can have an actual board that you can
Permanent grid.
Yeah, for grids. Yeah.
I recommend also tarps.
Yes.
There you go, tarps.
Yes. And there's downloadable sizes ng tiles or hex.
Yeah.
Now you can get 3x6, 4x4, hanap lang sa net. It's free.
Alright, so we're just about done with my panel. Sorry, it overshot. So we will proceed. We will start with Justin's next panel in 5 minutes.
Oh no,
Then
I
you
can start now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But you need to break, di ba? So, you can
Just get some
Yeah,
drinks.
we will start in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.